My husband's name was Gerald. Gerald Raymond Whitfield. 64 years old, salt and pepper hair, the kind of man who wore a suit to his own backyard barbecues just because he liked the feeling. He died on a Tuesday in March. Heart attack. No warning. One moment he was standing in the kitchen pouring his second cup of coffee. And the next moment he was on the floor. I was the one who called 911. I was the one who rode in the ambulance. I was the one who sat in that hospital waiting room for 4 hours. Alone. Until a doctor came out and said the words that split my world clean in half. And 3 days later, at his funeral in Raleigh, North Carolina, while I was still wearing the same black dress I'd bought the morning after he died, his daughter from his first marriage walked up to me between the rows of folding chairs and slid a legal eviction notice directly into my hands. Her name was Renata. Renata Whitfield Coombs. 41 years old. Gerald's only child from his first marriage, which ended before I ever entered the picture. She'd never liked me. She'd never pretended to. From the first dinner Gerald brought me to, she looked at me the way you look at a stain on a white tablecloth. Polite enough in front of her father. Ice cold the second he left the room. She thought I was after Gerald's money. And honestly, I understood why she felt that way. He was older, established, comfortable. I was 43 when we married, his second wife. 11 years younger, no children of my own. From the outside, I could see how it looked. But what Renata never understood, and never tried to, was that I loved Gerald Whitfield in the way you love someone when you've chosen them freely. Not from need. Not from desperation. From want. Real, uncomplicated, everyday want. I'd had my own career before Gerald. Commercial real estate management. 15 years of it. I knew how to read a lease agreement the way other people read a menu, fast. Comfortable, looking for what didn't belong. When Gerald and I got married, I stepped back from full-time work to help him run Whitfield Moving and Storage, a company he'd built from one truck and a prayer back in 1998. By the time I came into the picture, it had 12 trucks, 4 warehouse contracts, and a reputation in the Raleigh-Durham market that other moving companies genuinely envied. I ran the books. I managed the vendor contracts. I renegotiated the insurance every 2 years. I was the one who spotted that a warehouse manager had been skimming fuel costs for 8 months and recovered nearly $40,000 through a quiet civil claim. Gerald always said I was the best business decision he ever made. He said it in front of Renata once, at Thanksgiving. She smiled the smile of someone who had just tasted something sour. About 3 years before Gerald died, something shifted. I noticed it slowly at first. Phone calls Gerald would take in the garage. A new attorney's name on documents that came to the house, not our usual firm. Renata visiting more often than she had in years. Always when I happened to be running errands or at an appointment. I didn't confront Gerald. Not right away. I watched. I paid attention. And eventually, because Gerald trusted me completely with the filing system, I found a draft document in a folder he hadn't locked. It was a revised will. Not the one we'd drawn up together 6 years earlier. A new one. Prepared by an attorney I didn't recognize. With a Cary, North Carolina address. It left the house to Renata. The business to Renata. The 2 rental properties in Durham to Renata. It left me a one-time payment of $75,000 and a line that said, asterisk, in recognition of her contributions to the household, asterisk. $75,000. For 19 years. I sat with that document for a long time. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold. And I thought. I thought about the vendor I'd caught stealing. I thought about the warehouse lease I'd renegotiated and saved us $11,000 a year. I thought about every tax season, every payroll cycle, every client complaint I'd handled with a smile while Gerald played golf. And then I thought about what I was going to do about it. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't hire a divorce attorney. I didn't say a single word to Gerald. I called a woman named Patricia Osei. She was a business attorney I'd worked with years before Gerald, back in my commercial real estate days. Sharp, quiet, and loyal to whoever was paying her retainer. I'd been the one paying it for years, even after I stepped back from real estate. Old habit. Turned out to be a very good one. Patricia and I met 3 times over the next 4 months. Always during the day. Always while Gerald thought I was at lunch with a friend or running the quarterly vendor review. Here's what Patricia helped me understand. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. That meant that regardless of what a will said, as a spouse I had what's called an elective share, a legal right to a portion of the marital estate. But beyond that, there was something more specific that applied to me. Because I had worked in the business, substantively, documented, compensated below market rate in exchange for an ownership promise Gerald had made verbally twice and in writing once, in an email I had saved, I had a legitimate claim to a portion of the business as a business partner, not just as a spouse. Patricia drafted a business partnership recognition filing. We documented every contribution I'd made. The fuel recovery. The lease renegotiation. The vendor contracts in my name. The payroll system I'd personally built and administered. The email from Gerald, dated 4 years earlier, where he'd written. And I'm quoting directly. Asterisk. This business is as much yours as it is mine. We'll make it official when the time is right. The time became right on my schedule. Not his. We also made sure that the 2 paid-off vehicles registered in my name stayed in my name. That the joint investment account, which I'd contributed to equally for 11 of our 19 years, had my co-ownership properly recorded. That my salary history, modest as it was documented through the business payroll records. Patricia filed everything through the proper channels. Quietly. Legally. Without drama. I went home every night and made dinner. I sat across from Gerald and talked about the weather, the news, a client problem at the warehouse. I was present. I was warm. I was exactly the wife he thought he knew. And I waited. Gerald died 18 months after Patricia filed the first document. I don't think he ever knew what I'd done. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. Both, probably. In different proportions on different days. The heart attack came fast. The doctors said he likely didn't suffer long. That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in that hospital. The grief was real. I want to say that plainly. Whatever had shifted between Gerald and me in those final years. Whatever quiet betrayal had been building in that revised will. I had loved him. And losing him was real loss. Real pain. But grief and preparation are not opposites. You can love someone and still protect yourself. The funeral was 3 days later. A Thursday. The church we'd attended for 14 years. Half full of people Gerald had known through business and the neighborhood. Renata sat in the front row on the right. I sat in the front row on the left. We did not speak before the service. She was composed. Dressed well, a charcoal suit. Tasteful jewelry. She played the role of grieving daughter with precision. Several people came to her to offer condolences before they came to me. I noticed that too. After the service, during the reception in the church hall, I was standing near the windows with a plate of food I wasn't eating, when Renata appeared at my elbow. She didn't say hello. She didn't say she was sorry for my loss. She said, "I need you to look at something." And she held out a sealed envelope. I took it. I opened it. It was a notice of ownership transfer and occupancy termination. Legal language for, "You have 60 days to vacate the property at our home address." Signed by an attorney. Dated 2 days after Gerald's death. She'd had it prepared before he was even buried. She said, "I know this is difficult timing. But I think it's better to be clear about where things stand. People nearby were watching. Not obviously. The way people pretend not to watch while watching everything. I looked at the document. I looked at her. And I set it down on the table next to the food tray. Opened my purse. And removed a folded set of documents Patricia had given me to carry. Just in case. Because Patricia Osei had told me, months earlier, Renata is going to move fast. You need to be faster. I unfolded those papers and held them out to Renata. I said, you might want to read this first. She took them. Slowly. The way you take something from someone when you're not sure if it's a gift or a trap. She started reading. I watched her eyes move across the first page. Then the second. The color left her face in stages. First her cheeks. Then her lips. Then, somehow, even her eyes went pale. She said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a court-filed business partnership recognition. A documented spousal contribution claim. And a notice of my elective share rights under North Carolina law. Patricia Osei's contact information is on the last page. Your attorney will know what to do with it." What Renata was holding, what she was struggling to process in the middle of her father's funeral reception, was the legal confirmation that I was a documented partner in Whitfield Moving and Storage. Not a spouse with a courtesy share. A partner. With a recorded interest in the business. Backed by 19 years of documented contribution and a very helpful email from Gerald himself. The will could transfer ownership of the company to Renata all it wanted to. It could not transfer away my already filed partnership interest. That had been established before Gerald died. Before the will was even probated. She would inherit a business. But she would inherit it with a co-owner. One she could not remove. And that was just the beginning. Because the documents also outlined my elective share claim, meaning that regardless of the will, North Carolina law entitled me to a percentage of the total marital estate. The house included. She tried to contest it. Of course she did. Her attorney sent 3 letters in the first month. Patricia responded to each one with patience and precision. Renata's attorney argued the partnership recognition was improper. Patricia produced the email. He argued the email was informal. Patricia produced the payroll records. The vendor contracts in my name. The lease renegotiation documentation. And a signed letter from the company's largest client confirming that I had been their primary point of contact for 6 years. Renata hired a second attorney. Then a forensic accountant. The forensic accountant, I was later told, spent 3 weeks going through the company's books. Looking for something. Anything. That would undermine my claim or suggest my contributions had been overstated. What he found instead was a company in excellent financial health. And 18 months of records that showed. Clearly, who had actually been running it. Because I had kept meticulous records. Because that's what you do when you've spent 15 years in commercial real estate and you know that documentation is the only thing standing between you and someone else's version of the truth. Renata showed up at Patricia's office in May, 2 months after the funeral. I wasn't there. Patricia told me about it afterward. She had come, Patricia said, without her attorney. Which told Patricia everything she needed to know about how the legal bills were stacking up. She told Patricia she wanted to talk about a settlement. Patricia told her she was welcome to have her attorney reach out. Renata said her attorney had advised her the case was not favorable. She said it quietly. Without her usual composure. Patricia said she'd pass the message along. We settled in June. I won't share every number because those are private. What I will tell you is this. I kept my home. I kept my documented partnership interest in Whitfield Moving and Storage, with a structured buyout option if Renata chose to purchase my share at fair market value within 3 years. I kept both vehicles. I received my elective share of the marital estate, which was considerably more than the $75,000 the revised will had offered me in exchange for 19 years of my life. Renata took the 2 rental properties. She took the business, with me as a silent partner until she exercised the buyout option. She took whatever remained of her father's personal accounts after probate and legal fees. Legal fees. 3 attorneys over 4 months. I was told the number was substantial. She exercised the buyout option 14 months later. Had to take out a loan to do it. The business, without anyone running the operational side the way I had. Lost 2 major warehouse contracts within the first year. I heard that from a vendor I'd stayed in contact with. He called me to ask if I was consulting anywhere new. I'm 62 now. I live in the same house Gerald and I shared for 16 years. I repainted the kitchen last fall, a warm sage green that Gerald never would have approved of. I went back to consulting part-time. Commercial real estate operations. Turns out 19 years of running a business doesn't disappear just because someone tried to erase you from it. Patricia Osei sends me a Christmas card every year. Signed. Asterisk. Still the best retainer I ever kept active. I think about Gerald sometimes. What he was thinking when he signed that revised will. Whether Renata pressured him in the last years when his health was declining. Whether some part of him expected me to just accept whatever I was handed. Maybe he forgot who he'd married. But I hadn't forgotten. And Patricia's filing date, 18 months before his death, made sure that no one else could forget either. Here's what I want you to remember. If you take nothing else from this story. Preparation is not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not greed. And knowing your rights before you need them is not the same as expecting the worst. Sometimes it's the only reason you're still standing after the worst has already happened. And that was just the beginning. Because what happened next, 3 weeks after the settlement was signed, I never saw coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.